So welcome everyone. We're here to talk about a really exciting topic of what's happening with wireless deployments from the network perspective. And we have three very knowledgeable people here today. I thought I would start with Chris and just get some sense from you. I know that you are very aware of where there's fiber in your metro New York, New Jersey area. And wanted to get a sense of where you're seeing wireless and wireline convergence coming into play, kind of what the term means for you, and what trends you're seeing in that area.
Sure. So at Connexity, we're a full service integration company. So we service everything from site acquisition. So our biggest customers are mobile network operators today, the AT&Ts, the Sprints, the T-Mobiles of the world, and whatnot. And also in New York, there's a wireless franchise needed to operate in the outdoor space for to put wireless gear on top of city-owned poles for network build for 5G. So, and we're also involved. We're also very engaged in the in-building space. So what the trends that we're seeing today is, we're finding that a lot of these mobile network operators and these mobile franchisees in New York and the northern New Jersey area are looking to put a lot of this small cell infrastructure in as fast as they can based on the current, the current situation within COVID and these and the demand that's needed only because of the need for 5G based on a lot of work from home programs now, with every company involving all their employees to do a work from home program, as well as now we're seeing even a lot of residential need, only because now prior to the school year and the end of the school year last year, we're finding out a lot of need is needed for bandwidth and different functions so people can operate their daily lives. So, we're getting a ton of inquiries right now about building more outdoor small cell units across the New York City and 5 boroughs here in New York, as well as in northern New Jersey. And what we do as a business is we try and combine the fiber portion, right, needed to get back to a head end, and the node portion, which is all the outdoor cells or indoor building infrastructure that we put in for these building owners, and just putting that all together and getting a design together, and then putting the implementation of all that in motion. And as well as at the end of all that, we conduct our commissioning. So we test all those, we test all the infrastructure to make sure that it's operating properly back with the mobile network operators. So we're seeing a lot of activity over the past 5-6 months. And I think it's a push. I think you're seeing even a bigger push for this 5G infrastructure to be implemented, only because of the current, environmental situation we're in with this COVID virus.
The carriers have been kind of super competitive about 5G too, so it seems like that would be a big driver for it as well.
Joan, that's the other piece, right? So, everybody wants to be the first one to have this 5G infrastructure up and running, and right. Having, people who have been hearing about this for so long now at least have the ability to take advantage of it. So yes, that's another big driver today.
Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to move on to Gary, who is with Freddie Mac, and you have kind of an enterprise perspective on things. Where are you seeing the biggest illustrations of wired and wireless convergence? What does that term kind of mean to you, and what are the hot buttons right now in that area for you?
So the biggest terms are where our headquarters is in Tyson's. They're redoing the roads, they're redoing the water pipes. As they lay in the new water pipes, they're laying in a whole new fiber infrastructure on top of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this way the hole's already cut in the street. From a wireline perspective, everyone knows AT&T and other carriers have ended, the end of life to POTS lines. So we are currently aggressively looking towards LTE POTS lines as analog lines off, like a Cisco product like the VGs. They're just not producing strong enough or committed signal, nor are they able to put a location properly, to 911. So
Right, okay.
one of our biggest goals at this point is to get off the rings. We're going to dark fiber our campuses. We're going to, and I'll essentially take over that role back from the phone company. Next, we're going to start severing all the copper coming through our buildings to the last mile so fiber optics can replace it. From an internal perspective, we've pretty much eliminated all copper line needs other than on some old T1 circuits we might still have lying around. So at this point, to us, the 5G is going to be a core technology, not just necessarily a handset talking to a carrier.
Right.
We have 7 different DASs in our building, including public safety. The reason why we did it that way was to get maximum spectrum from every carrier to aggregate.
Yeah.
Because we could have anywhere from 10 to 12,000 people in a building at a time. And being able to simulcast to do corrections and changing power up, power down on our own DASs has been, kind of the source of the success, of having Freddie Mac, plus the attraction of, the whole safer building, smarter building, attracting the younger generation to come in, because by having that DAS footprint takes us away from the small cell footprint and allows within the building for us to exceed speeds today of 140 megabits per second. So if our corporate network went down, they can all run VDI on their tablets, and no one has to run home. Pre-COVID, huge success stories on it. And as the future goes forward, I look forward to a lot of donations of pulled out copper, as it gets recycled. So from a high level, I hope that kind of explains what we're looking at, as we don't want copper in our buildings anymore.
And you mentioned that you were going to be putting fiber in, to connect you kind of with the wide area and phasing out copper. Is that fiber going to come from a phone company, from a competitive carrier? Is it something you're going to own yourselves? Whose fiber will that be?
So from a base station technology, that would be carrier fiber. From in-building solution, I have 5 buildings. They're total of over 2 million square feet at our HQ. I have 37 IDFs it takes between the 5 buildings to wire up. So we're already using air-blown fiber between the buildings. We're using composite to the edge. We're using fiber down technology and kind of a spine and leaf type of mentality, to where, the spine are the remotes and the leaves are, the remote access units. And being able to follow that footprint, it allows me to lay in a brand new system on top of the existing system. I can start moving frequencies over one by one by one. So I'm automatically interconnecting on my own system. If I could hop from one to the other, walk inside the building, walk outside the building, climb to the roof.
Yeah.
And it is a very progressive roadmap. We've been working on this for the last year. We're very far into it. And the only thing we get from our employees through workplace services surveys, thank God we can watch hockey or their favorite sport. If there's a soccer game going on and it's 0-0, I've learned in the last year, those people will stay here until that game's over, and they will stream it on their phones. And we don't mind them doing it.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Great. So I would like next to move on to Ed. DECIX, or I always called it DECIX, but I guess some folks call it DKIX. I never actually heard it spoken out loud. I always just saw it written down somewhere. But I know that you're kind of a carrier and data center neutral exchange for internet traffic and so on. what does wireless wire-like convergence mean to you? Where is it coming into play in terms of your operations, and what are the trends that you're seeing there?
Yes, historically, we almost think of it's almost more of a fixed or mobile situation. We see, especially in the more rural areas, right? Wireless is used on a fixed basis extensively. The WISP community uses it in place of fiber or physical connectivity. It's easier to deploy, more effective, so that's long been and as speeds go up and capabilities go up of the radios, they're more and more able to compete with, if you will, wired connections. I mean, obviously, even the big carriers use fixed wireless between cell sites. You can see them. You can see the dishes often. With 5G, it's actually changing that all the more, right? There's no longer necessarily a speed difference between mobile and fixed, or mobile and any kind of wired, right? So now you have the ability to address both the mobile, and we think of mobile applications, but the applications go much broader than that, the Internet of Things, the smart cars. And so, we see 5G is going to change everything, right? It's not just how much faster we can show our mobiles downloading, right? It changes the speed to the house. It changes the ability to deliver to the household. It changes the ability to deliver to anywhere, to mobile cars. And it also changes where that data goes. It runs less like a hub and spoke and more like a smart mesh network going forward. So, all sorts of things will change on the fixed to wired versus wire. It's really, the convergence in my mind of the same technology being used for a lot of it for fixed and mobile. It's becomes more ubiquitous, and it changes the way the networks flow. So it's a lot's changing, and that's why there's so many initiatives at the edge and smart deployments at the edge, because it's not all coming back to the core anymore. It very much changes how things will work.
Right, and how does that trend impact the internet traffic exchange business? Because it used to be that you'd have these certain places where like Virginia, there was one in Virginia and one on the West Coast, and a few key. I mean, this goes back quite a few years. There's been a gradual sort of pushing out to more and more places where traffic can be exchanged. But it seems like when you keep hearing about mobile edge computing and all of that it's going to be pushed out even further. How does that impact your business?
Clearly, yeah. I mean, it will change our business, right? I mean, to some degree, we want to enhance kind of edge to core connections with our partners, but ultimately, it's moving, if you will, more exchange capability further out from the core. You need all the traffic can't come back, and we can enable it to come back quicker and more readily with our partners, but ultimately, the traffic can't just keep coming back to a core. It has to be able to be exchanged closer to the edge. So you're going to see more and more internet exchanges pop up in more rural areas. And we're going to try to, the content networks will have to support that. And there's many initiatives to make it easy for the content networks to deploy, more towards the edge, and then to support that with exchanges or network configurations by the various operators or data center players to allow that to more readily occur.
And how dense is this edge data center infrastructure going to have to be? How far apart from each other will these data centers have to be?
Well, it really depends. You think about it right now, there's vast areas of the country. You could look on, let's say, PeeringDB and see where certain big content networks are. They identify where they are. It's public information.
Right. And
you can see the vast differences in geography between their sites. And so I think there's no final answer to this. It's going to be an evolution where there's more and more get to, let's say, secondary cities or tertiary cities, right? Right now, most traffic flows to the kind of big city areas. That's in whether there's exchange or not, the content network, it's where they are. And they have to, if it's going from a content network somewhere else, it's got to get back to the closest content network. So it's going to be an evolution as things get more and more of, let's say, regional deployments, and then, somewhere sub-regional, if you will, within, and it's tough for me to say, I'm not a network engineer, where the end game is, but clearly there's vast amount of traffic that will be aggregated, and to move it all the, back many, not only as latency, but as cost to move all that traffic. So to be able to kind of move it and keep it between edge locations, again, more of a mesh, that's going to change a lot of networks and how things work. So it's again, where that is where that ends up, I can't say, but it's certainly, we'll and we see fledgling exchanges in many areas. You see they're listed in towns that didn't have them before, and certainly not, the top 20 cities of the U.S., well beyond that. So it's a movement that's going on, and it will continue.
And I should note there's actually a couple of different types of data centers. I mean, you're kind of more involved in the internet exchange type places, but we also have, we're hearing a lot from the mobile carriers about edge computing, MEC, mobile, they have their own acronym for that. And this is something, Chris, maybe you have a perspective on, is are you finding that, how dense are the mobile carriers wanting their networks to be? Do you have a sense of that yet? They're talking about, to support things like the car, they need really low latency. The latency of reaching the data center and back has to match what the 5G network can do. Do you have a perspective on that? Can you have any insight yet?
Sure. What we're seeing now is, right, all these mobile network operators, in order to provide the speed of service and the quality of service that they want to provide on the 5G platform, they have to have what we even call an ultra dense network, right? I mean, where we're doing our work, a lot of our activity is in New York City, which is highly dense. And from a fiber and equipment perspective, we're putting 5G radios and antennas every 200-300 feet, across New York City. So I think what they're seeing is, in order to get these complex, services over a 5G network, there needs to be ultra dense. We have to provide an ultra dense network, not only in the fiber network, but also in the radio and antenna network, in order to be able to provide that. So we're in New York City, we're building thousands and thousands of small cells within that small geographical area, in order to be able to provide, in order to be able to get the quality of service that they need, and the bandwidth that they need over a 5G network. So that's what we're seeing from our perspective.
And are the carriers sharing infrastructure? In other words, if somebody puts up a small cell site, is it just for them, or I'm just picking a name.
I think primarily what we're seeing is the mobile network operators are putting their own infrastructure up, but they're sharing. If they don't have a franchise, they're sharing almost real estate on that outdoor furniture, whether it be a pole or a kiosk or or a building. They're sharing that space through the mobile franchisees in New York. So it's necessarily it's their own equipment, but it's not necessarily their own space on these infrastructures, in particular poles that we hang this equipment on.
That outdoor furniture term is an interesting one that's come up. I always start thinking about shade boxes and things like that.
Joan, we're starting to see very creative ways of putting this equipment into different spaces. Obviously there's only so many poles, and this doesn't happen in every big city, but New York, the government agencies that we work through have very stringent rules about what you can hang, where you can hang them, how many poles you can hang them on. So, we're running out of infrastructure So now they're finding creative ways of putting this infrastructure in other places. So, you know, it's a huge push with a lot of creativity behind it.
Okay. Question for Gary too. You, my ears kind of perked up when you talked about the public, you know, having multiple networks inside your facilities so that people can, it sounded like it's a way of basically making sure they can always connect. Is the idea that if one network operator is, you know, congested or something, that you can use a different one? Is that part of the idea, or?
No, it's actually, first, it's public safety. We
Right.
want all carrier SOS phones to work.
And is that
Second,
FirstNet specifically? Is that FirstNet?
well,
Oh,
it's FirstNet. It could be priority routing over LTE.
mhm.
It really just depends on the type of DAS, how much control, and how much the carrier is really working with you.
Right.
That's usually kind of based on handset deals. So we own all of our equipment at
Mhm.
Freddie Mac. The reason we do that is we boast a 99.7% coverage. Our penthouse is where our generators are at. There's no phones up there. Cell phone is a life-giving device now. It's time that Enterprise America wakes up and realizes that, you know, nobody owns a phone. And they're $5 at Walmart that can plug into a jack and just work. And they'll go out and buy the phones that need power. When the lights go out, those phones don't work. So I have to look at it as, you know, an interlace of power sharing between the different DASs. So if one network went down, one carrier doesn't have a total outage for our building. When we're looking at some of the different, you know, layers of construction of our building, looking at the lower frequencies to 600 to 700 and how far they drop is cost savings to us when it comes to deploying, you know, these smart building features and IoT and everything else. It's also as important that when we look at these devices that are coming out, you know, it's not just a Samsung and Apple world anymore. LG and Motorola have come back. We have to be very nimble and fluid to where not only do we have a second network that has nothing to do with the core network, the second network being the DAS allows continuance of operations real time. Building a 5G core within our building and let our devices talk privately to our own core, and then you add Wi-Fi 6E into the picture. Now all of a sudden you have convergence of your networks, always on Starbucks model.
Right.
That is the ultimate direction. That is the direction, you know, we would like to see ourselves go. And more importantly, I think it's going to become part of the real estate future. You know, why buy a building that someone has not cored holes through every floor and have all the routes in there? Because a lot of times bringing ground penetrating radar to the 44th floor of a building in LA, not so fun. Because, you know, and you have to do that because you can't saw through rebar.
Right.
And more, so we have to start looking at wireless as more of a comp. A lot of high schools right now are playing with, every high school has a radio tower, okay? There's a couple of schools in California who are playing with LTE now, private LTE, and they're broadcasting it now and messing around with it to where they could bring the low-income housing the internet via school equipment. And I can go on several other use cases, but I hope you kind of get the idea where we're heading with that.
We're getting close to our end of our time, but I think I can squeeze in maybe one more question. I wanted to ask Ed a bit more about the wireless ISPs. What's going on with those folks? What you know, what kind of bandwidth are they delivering these days? I don't know if you have have visibility into that. kind of what are they looking to do next? There's a lot of new spectrum coming available, and there's been talk about leveraging LTE to get better economics and so on and so forth. Are you seeing big growth in that area?
Is that question to me?
I'm sorry, I meant that for Ed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, clearly, I think we're helping to part of our initiative is help allow the wireless ISPs to get to us, and that's. But to your point, I think there's a current auction going on. There's,
right.
I mean, we're going to see current, Gary just talked about private LTE, the private 5G, if you will. There's going to be continued developments at both the radio and the technology side that will allow them to continue to enhance service, to their customers. Again, the concept is often, though, one, they've got to compete with, let's say, incumbents. And one of the ways they do that is to utilize, let's say, the more rural areas and come into the central business districts of the towns they serve, or the areas they serve. But then, of course, is to have the best performance and lowest cost structure to get that traffic, which is necessarily at the edge. I mean, that's where they are. The eyeballs are where they are, back to where the content is. And so, there's definitely an evolving space at a lot of levels.
Okay.
And as we see more and more, let's say, data centers that embrace aggregation in the field, right? So, you may not, the content may not be there, but there may be a place where the wireless regional people can hub, and then more readily get back to the core areas. So, there's going to be a lot of developments in that whole area, the whole space.
And those are, a lot of those companies are quite small. They'll have, maybe even just several dozen customers. Are they working through, are they kind of organizing to work as a group to achieve the kinds of things you're talking about?
Sure. There's, for example, the WISPO organization, right, that wireless ISP organization. And, part of course, the purpose of such organizations is so they can share stories and understanding of how they've been successful in their various areas and how they've competed. So there are absolutely some where we see various ISPs working together one way or another. That happens, definitely happens.
Okay. I think we are just about out of time. But I hesitate to start another question because we might run over, but I really appreciate everyone taking the time to talk with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Thanks.